Morning, everyone. This is Reverend Cedarman. I'm here outside enjoying. Here in Seattle, it was supposed to be snowing today, but actually, it's quite beautiful. I woke up early this morning to do suigyo, even though it was snowing early this morning. Ice water purification, and then I did service, and then I did a wonderful hike in order to reconnect and commune with nature and all of the local deities. So today, I wanted to share with all of you the concept, are you too hard to chant? Now, this is an important concept to think about because it's a question that you need to ask yourself. Because I'm sure that any person here has had an aversion to chanting or waking up and then also uh, causing the practice to go by the wayside for other things. Our ideas of priorities change. We put other things in front of our practice and then we suffer because of it. Um, when we need to always understand, and this is why I always ask people whenever something is going on in their life, I ask them, first of all, how is your practice? Because through the practice, we're able to actually see that something's going on. A lot of times, due to this aversion, is because something in our mind, one of the other realms, has creeped up and has taken precedence in our mind. So, therefore, the Buddha is no longer in the front of our mind, and we are led by other things, such as our desires and also our laziness, perhaps in my case, and everything else, such as that. So, as we know, life has so many ups and downs. So life is constantly changing, and our practice basically shows that to us, that it's constantly a struggle in order to prioritize things. That was one of the greatest things I learned from Tsukamoto Sensei, is that the idea of prioritizing. Because I thought, okay, everything just fits together, and I try to do as many things as I can, and that's how I live my life. However, priorities are very important because with priorities, we need to understand the purpose and priority of the Lotus Sutra. Because when we put that into our life, we're able to put that into the forefront of our mind, and therefore we are being led by the Buddha rather than our ego. So as we know, our lives has so many ups and downs. Our schedules change. It's much easier to maintain a practice if we have a balanced schedule. However, when schedules change and circumstances change, we sometimes find ourselves lost for time. Sometimes we're used to doing 20 to 30 minutes, maybe an hour, 2 hours chanting or practice in the morning. And then suddenly we changed everything, and therefore we lost our ability to chant. Or something, as in the question that I asked, are you too hurt to chant? Something happens in our life in which suddenly we come back into ourselves, into our mind, into our suffering, and we just become almost immersed in the suffering that we just can't get beyond. And when we do that, we lose focus. It's almost as if trying to think of the Dharma makes us anxious or makes us upset. And so therefore we have an aversion, and then and then it develops into a laziness that we wish not to almost see the Buddha. This is the true concept of suffering, I believe, in Buddhism. We begin to have an aversion to the Buddha Dharma, to the Lotus Sutra, to our teachers, to our sanghas. And I'm sure many of you, if you think about it, because as a priest, I get to see this all the time, people suddenly have an aversion to coming to the Sangha. Once they feel uncomfortable with something, one of the teachings that they may not particularly care for, because teaching is not always an easy practice, because it brings up and challenges the things that we need to work on. The Buddha allows us to see, once that pond is settled or that mirror is dusted, when we see the true reflection, we suddenly see what we have to work on. And I have to admit, most people do not like that. They usually run in fear, and suddenly that releases a lot of times hurt and issues that we've had in the past that allows us to become a fertilizer for our practice. But most people don't see it as a fertilizer. They see it as something bad and to be avoided, just as how most people deal with suffering. Most people deal with suffering as it's something to be avoided, but in reality, they can avoid it. So this is a kind of ridiculous idea, and the Buddha basically shows us that. Uh, it's important to know and to realize ourselves. Ask yourself, why am I not practicing? What am I feeling? A lot of times for myself, it'll be laziness, which ultimately that is the top layer. But below that layer is something that is basically an issue that I've done or I've dealt with, something that's come up that actually feel I'm too tired or overwhelmed or anxious, all of these issues. Because when I try to regulate any of those things by myself, without my practice, I'm unable to. And even if I'm able to think my way through it, it doesn't always sustain me. Because I may understand it one day, I'll be totally fine with the conclusion that I've come to and how to deal with things. But the next day, it just comes right back because suffering is perpetual, right? As long as we are involved and we partake of it. So therefore, we need the Buddha Dharma in order to bring the Buddha mind to the front of our thoughts, to make our base, our stability in the Buddha Dharma, in the Lotus Sutra. And so that's the next question. What does chanting do? Why does simply chanting do anything? It seems almost silly in a way that something as simple as chanting, not engaging in austere practices, etc., will enable us to attain enlightenment. But actually, it's bringing the Buddha to the forefront of our mind. When we chant, we actualize, we nourish the Buddha nature. And that's why in speaking to people, I tell them, look, you can think, read, do whatever you want, develop whatever philosophy, etc. Buddhism only works if you actualize it in your life. If you don't, then it's the same as having a book or a belonging to an organization and saying, okay, this is what I am. But actually, in reality, you still are the same suffering person that you were, the same hurt person as you were before. And you haven't really dealt with anything. You've just covered it with another facade. So when we chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, it comes to the forefront. It actualizes. And my teacher actually said it's like a circle. And in our mind, we have many realms and states. And that actually, those actually are big or small. Usually the Buddha realm is so minute because people do not nourish it. So they don't almost even think it's there. It takes a long time to even realize that it's there. And this is not an illusionary belief, right? But actually, as it grows, the others, in order to change space, become smaller. So anger and aversion, all that never really disappears. However, it becomes manageable. And when the Buddha Dharma grows, the Buddha mind, we're able to actually see it for what it is and realize it. Then it does not hold power over our lives. And the most important thing to realize is that what are we actually doing? We have to actually initiate action because, as we hear over and time again, the way of the Bodhisattva. The way of the Bodhisattva is action. What does it mean to be a Bodhisattva? In my understanding, to be a Bodhisattva means to have compassion. But what is compassion? As you look in the English dictionary, it says empathy, but actually it's deeper than that. As I said many times, the word jihi, ji means to be empathetic. That means to actually have feeling. Seems easy, but actually not. This is what humanity is. So to feel another human suffering, to know what another is feeling because you can relate it to your own life, to be self-conscious and aware of what it means to be alive and to deal with suffering is to be a human. Most people are not even to the realm of being a human. They don't feel other people's suffering. They can walk by and not feel any sympathy or empathy for anyone but themselves. In the mind of the Buddha, it adds the next character, he, for Bodhisattva, the action of removing suffering. How do we remove suffering? Do we remove suffering by making someone understand something or by doing something to someone else? No, because actually we can't make anyone do anything they don't want to do. And also for people that actualize, they have their own time. As we see in the sutra over and over again, the Buddha teaches with expedience because he understands that when a person's mind is ready, when the timing, causes and conditions are correct, then something changes. Not because we make something change, but the important thing is our action, our stance. Where are we coming from? Are we coming from a state of suffering? Or are we coming from a state of Buddhahood? Right? Because if we are coming from a state of Buddhahood, we are able to imbue or benefit others by our attainment or understanding or practice. So many of us are not Buddhas. So therefore, we have to use our practice in order to sustain and help others and to be able to bring others to understanding and realizing their own Buddha nature. So therefore, this is the idea of practice, and something that I've realized is that if I practice for myself, I'm very lazy. But if I practice for others, I'm able to get up and to practice more, and to practice longer, and to understand and read more. That is why Sangha is so important. Now, many people, many Buddhist practitioners, and many traditions of Buddhism do not actualize the third jewel of the Sangha. And again, this is the ultimate stance of the ego, because the ego basically tells you that you can do everything by yourself. But we realize the interdependence of all things, that we are not simply independent, we are interdependent. That means connected to all beings. So therefore, we have to rely on others to support us as well. So this is a kind of secular relationship. So therefore, when I think how to benefit the members of the Sangha through my practice as a Nichiren Shu Buddhist, I'm able to actually sustain my practice and grow my practice. But if I do it simply for myself, I will stay on the couch and watch TV. It's simply how it is. So once again, I hope today you will think about when you are, or maybe you're experiencing now, are you too hurt to chant, to practice? And when you have that issue, when you are too hurt to even go beyond yourself, that mind of hurt or anger is so big, I tell you to go to the Sangha. Reach out to a Sangha member. And that's what we're doing with Enkyoji Network, is that your Sangha is becoming a universal Sangha. So even though you may not have a Sangha in your area, you have people you can connect with. And in the future, I hope that you will be able to connect with other people in your area and be able to help us teach people, bring them out of their suffering and into the light of Buddhahood. So I thank everyone very much for today, for this Rowdy Buddhist podcast. And I hope you all have a good week. Thank you very much.